So today I was messing around with the filters, and I wasn't all that familiar with them because I really hadn't used them in some time. So of course the first place I went to was the wiki for information on how the filters work. Unfortunately, the data there was out of date, so after I spent some time in chat and got some answers to the filter settings. Firefly added a new filter setting recently to the game, and it is not documented in the wiki. To filter your map, then this basically means that you're going to be screening some things out that you don't want to see, and keeping things that you're interested or you want to focus on. It is in the bottom right corner, the very lowest button, let's say. So for map filtering, you have a few different options. Now, basic stuff like show only villages in your house, show only villages in your faction, show only traders, show only foraging scouts, show only attacking troops, and of course show only AIs. These are the basic buttons that you'll be using, but there are also some additional ones. And these are not buttons, but instead they're checkboxes. They basically have a on-off status. So showing player symbols. Now this one always confused me because it's not even mentioned in the wiki, and it really, the terminology is a bit ambiguous. What it means is it will show any, if you have all these other ones unchecked, this one and that one, if you have both of those unchecked, it will show players that you have flagged personally as an enemy or an ally. For example, let's set this player as an enemy. Now all of a sudden it shows up with a sword on that village. But if we go back to map filtering, turn on house symbols, you'll see they are also an ally because the house themselves have set that player to an ally. So it basically allows you to filter out your personal enemies. Of course, when you have player symbols checked, you'll still show which players are in your faction as well. But the most important thing is players are flagged as allies. They will show up as white diplomacy flowers, and that's an easy way to differentiate between an ally and an enemy when, for personal uses. Now, of course, if we're not interested in showing personal symbols, we can uncheck that and show faction symbols. Now, these are all, now that's interesting because it shows the flower that I put on that player as a personal symbol, as well as showing the sword that is a faction sword. And the same goes for the house, basically. It will show both of them as well. So when you check show player diplomacy, that is basically showing you the diplomacy that you hold alone, whereas showing faction diplomacy or house diplomacy will show the diplomacy that you hold plus the diplomacy that your faction and or your house also will show towards that player. The box above that is always show your villages. Now this basically means that when you're filtering for other things such as attacks, your villages will appear if you have that box checked. So like right here, I click attack, my villages are still on the map even though I'm not attacking anything. If I get rid of that symbol, village is gone. Now if you ever apply a filter, now these are the filters, these can all be applied, which means that to get rid of them, rather than checking a box, I mean, you have to click to unapply them, and you can't apply two at one time, unfortunately. I mean, I would like that as a feature to be able to, I mean, the way it's set up right now, they could all be check boxes. That's how it works. If you could have each one of these a checkbox and it would work the same way. I think there is an incredible opportunity here to allow players to sort of select more than one filter. Let's say you wanted to see all attacks and all foraging at the same time. It would allow, if you had, the way it's set up right now, it's almost as if you could do that, but I don't know, I hit control, it doesn't change anything, so apparently you can't, and I think that's a missed opportunity there. But yeah, so basically just these filters, they'll only show house and faction members. Faction will just remove house in case you want to see all house members. And the big difference between this and diplomacy symbols is diplomacy symbols are for the other houses or the other factions, both other houses, other factions that your house or your faction has diplomacy set with. So you can see, who your house has set as an ally or an enemy. You can see who your faction has set as an ally and enemy. And this differs from simply filtering showing only the villages in your house and showing only the villages in your faction, which it doesn't show any diplomatic stance. It just shows the faction houses and the house. I mean, it shows the faction villages and it shows the house villages. Now, if your faction is in your house, which of course it has to be, you will also see your faction members' villages when you choose the filter by house button. Now, there's some interesting ins and outs of the filter system. There's some ways you can sort of use it to your advantage. One of them is the fact that since monks are unfiltered, you cannot actually filter out monks anywhere on here, unlike scouts or something. This means that if you send out a monk and then send out a scout on top of that monk, and you have them both researched to where they basically go at the exact same speed, the enemy, potential enemies or even allies, will have a hard time seeing the monk. I mean, just at a glance, when you look across the map, unless you click on them good, it will just look like a scout moving across the map. Now, of course, this requires you to tailor your research towards such an end, but I have successfully done it in the past, and it is really funny as hell when you successfully pull it off, because you can basically sneak interdiction to faction members' villages, even if you are, let's say, a neutral, but you're helping the faction, you know. So yeah, it's sort of cloak and dagger sort of stuff, but that is pretty interesting. And you know, a lot of top players have asked for there to be a monk filter, and that hasn't been implemented yet, and I wish they would implement one, because then the advantage, that little bug that I just talked about, where you can send units over other units to conceal the fact that you're sending units, would not exist because you could filter it out. And one other very important thing that you can use the map filtering for is if somebody's attacking from their vassal. This is an easy way to tell if the attack comes from the vassal's village or it comes from the liege lord's village. Now, in this case, I have my vassal selected here, and I'm going to select the wolf lair. Now, I'm going to set up just the basic attack. I'm going to recall this, but so now there's an army coming from my vassal's village and going to the wolf lair. Now, to the rest of the map, it looks as if my vassal is attacking the wolf lair, and there's really no way to figure this out unless you use the filters. So going into the map filtering, now a filter attacks, and as you'll see, my vassal's village disappeared, and this is because my vassal is not attacking, but I'm attacking. So if you see this happen, like let's say you see an allied house maybe attacking your house, check their liege lord first, because it's possible that the attack is coming from an enemy who just simply has them as a vassal. And this is important because, when handling diplomacy, it's not nice to start off of basically accusing people of, sending attacks and stuff when you don't really know the full situation. So it allows you to see, okay, yep, not the vassal that's attacking my allies, it is the liege lord. So I'm just going to mail that vassal, and I'm going to ask them to drop their liege lord, because the liege lord is using their village as a base to attack other villages and other allied villages. Okay, let's just cancel that attack now, since we don't need it anymore. Now, one final thing about filtering is whenever you have a filter applied, you can close the bar, and it'll say filter active down here, so you know that the reason there aren't many villages on your map is because you have your filter on. But to get rid of it, you just click this little, I don't think it's a clear filter button, okay? It has a tooltip, and it brings everything back. Finally, one very useful feature of the map filtering is the ability to search for villages by a number instead of having to enter the entire name in. And this is especially useful in circumstances where your enemy, for example, is changing the name of their village repeatedly to sort of confuse players who are trying to time attacks on them, or if the name of the village is very common. There would be multiple results for it, and basically by searching for the villages by their ID, it allows you to focus right on the village that everyone else is talking about. Now, to enable village IDs, because it's disabled by default, you have to go into settings, and in advanced options there are checkboxes for view village IDs and view capital IDs. Now, I don't know why the capital ID option exists because if you go to map filtering and then you click search, you'll see that you can only search for village IDs. In other words, if you search for 44339 and search for that, you'll see nothing comes up. And that's the name of this parish, or this capital right here is 44339. So I'm not exactly sure why you would want to see the numbers. You can't actually search for capital numbers here, which I think is an oversight, but you can definitely search for village IDs. For example, what's my village ID? 105006. So let's move over here. Click search 105006. There you have it. Only one result. You can zoom right to it, just like that. It basically allows for better coordination between faction members, and a lot of players or a lot of factions are good on the map will have or be using the village ID number. And that, of course, you know, if you're wondering where you can find it, because there's no search bar. I think this is sort of an oversight. There's no search bar built right into the client, or the interface here of Stronghold Kingdoms, so you have to go to map filtering. It's not the most obvious, but it does make sense once you think about it. I think that pretty much covers everything I wanted to say about map filtering. I hope you found this useful. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.
Stronghold Kingdoms. The battle has just begun.